I feel like I'm living a nightmare, where my own body is this prison I'm trapped in.
Brandon Scott's journey on My 600-Pound Life was more than a fight against numbers on a scale. At over 700 pounds, he faced daily pain, relentless shame, and health risks that could have ended his life.
I cannot believe it, man. I'm just feeling really overwhelmed.
Yet what made his story unforgettable was not just the dramatic transformation, but the resilience, vulnerability, and kindness he showed through every setback. From confronting childhood trauma to fighting for love and a second chance, Brandon's story touched millions. So what made his journey stand out from every other transformation? Trapped inside his own body. For Brandon Scott, every day began with a battle against his own body. At just 33 years old and weighing more than 600 pounds, life inside his Ohio home felt more like a prison than a place of comfort. The moment his feet touched the floor each morning, sharp pain would shoot up through his legs, his knees threatening to buckle under the weight. It was a constant struggle, with even the simplest task requiring strength most people never had to think about. Getting out of bed was more than just an act of willpower. It was a choice between pushing forward or surrendering completely. And deep down, Brandon knew that if he didn't fight back soon, his body might eventually give up before he did. On top of his weight, Brandon suffered from severe lymphedema. Heavy, painful masses hung from his legs, pulling at his skin and making movement nearly impossible. Every step was a negotiation between pain and necessity, but he forced himself to keep going. If he stopped, he knew his girlfriend Taylor would be forced to care for him in ways he wasn't ready to accept. That thought alone kept him from giving up. Still, the fear of falling loomed over every shower, every trip to the bathroom, every attempt to stand. At his size, one accident could have been catastrophic. What weighed even heavier than his body was the shame. Brandon struggled to face his reflection because the man staring back felt unrecognizable. To the outside world, he believed he was a spectacle, someone to point at, whisper about, and judge. A single step outside brought stares and silent ridicule, and every glance confirmed what he feared people thought of him. Yet even with that shame, food remained the one thing that brought comfort. Cravings were constant and consuming, and the first meal of the day was always the most anticipated. It was the one part of his day that felt familiar, and the one habit that slowly kept destroying his future. Taylor tried to make life easier for him, but her love had become part of the problem. Wanting to see him happy, she brought him the foods he loved, even when she knew they were making things worse. It was a cycle neither of them knew how to break. He ate to feel better, and she fed him to see him smile. Despite this, Brandon didn't shift the blame. He knew his addiction was his own, and it had followed him for most of his life. That addiction traced back to his childhood when his home was filled with conflict and shouting. Food became his escape, a way to block out the chaos when his parents argued. By the time he was 6, he was already overweight, and the numbers kept climbing. When his father began studying law and his mother started working longer hours, Brandon was left to care for his younger siblings. The responsibility was overwhelming, and once again, food was the only thing that made the stress bearable. By 12, he weighed more than 250 pounds. His mother's constant criticism about his size only deepened his insecurities, and efforts to get him to exercise felt more like insults than support. The pressure fractured their relationship, but nothing stopped his eating. By the time he graduated high school at 18, he was already over 400 pounds. His life on a path that was only getting harder to turn around. And even though he didn't know it then, the choices he made in those early years would shape a battle far more difficult than he could ever imagine. That battle soon grew even harder as adulthood brought heartbreak, love, loss, and a last chance. Just as Brandon's bond with his father was beginning to heal, life dealt him another painful blow. At 21, he discovered that his father had been having an affair for years. A betrayal that shattered the family and left wounds that never truly healed. The divorce that followed forced Brandon into a new role as caretaker and provider. After finishing college, he moved back home to support his mother and siblings, but the pressure of that responsibility pushed him deeper into the one coping mechanism he knew best: food. Stress, anger, and heartbreak all found their outlet in eating, and the pounds quickly piled on once again. Brandon managed to find work as an elementary school teacher, but the demands of the job were too much for his body. The weight made standing, walking, and keeping up with the children nearly impossible. By the age of 24, he had gained another 100 pounds and crossed the 500-pound mark. Losing his job was another crushing blow, stripping him of his independence and isolating him from the outside world. Soon, he was leaving the house only to attend church, and it was there that fate brought Taylor into his life. At first, Taylor was shocked by his appearance, but as they spent time together, she discovered a kind and gentle soul beneath the surface. Their connection deepened quickly, yet as their love grew stronger, Brandon's health declined even further. Lymphedema began to develop, driving became impossible, and even the most basic daily tasks turned into exhausting challenges. Taylor eventually moved in with Brandon and his mother to help care for him full-time, an act of love that left him feeling both grateful and deeply guilty. He dreamed of proposing to her and building a future together, but he knew that in his condition it wouldn't be fair to ask her to commit to a life defined by his limitations. That guilt transformed into a powerful source of motivation. Determined to change for the people he loved, Brandon decided to seek help from renowned bariatric surgeon Dr. Nasruddin. The trip to Houston was daunting. A 17-hour drive replaced by a flight that brought new anxieties and harsh public scrutiny. People stared, whispered, and judged, and the humiliation nearly made him reconsider. Yet he pushed through because he knew this moment was his only chance to change everything. For the first time in years, he was about to face the truth, the real number on the scale, and it would reveal just how far he had to go to reclaim the life he desperately wanted. And no matter how terrifying that truth was, he was ready to face it head on. And facing it head on marked the true beginning of change. The fight for a second chance. Brandon's weight on the hospital scale read over 700 pounds, a number that landed like a punch to the gut. It was a sobering moment, but it did not shake his resolve. Instead of slipping into despair, he chose optimism. Determined to change, he listened carefully to Dr. Nasruddin's advice, taking full responsibility for how he had reached this point. The doctor made it clear that without significant weight loss, surgery was not an option. Brandon accepted this reality and committed himself to doing whatever it took to succeed. The first step was a strict, high-protein, low-calorie diet. Before he could even begin, though, he faced an obstacle he had not anticipated: blood tests. For most people, this was a minor part of the process, but for Brandon, who had a deep fear of needles, it was overwhelming. He panicked, nearly passing out during the procedure, yet he pushed through and completed it. That determination became a defining part of his journey. Back in Ohio, Brandon threw himself into the program with remarkable discipline. He tracked every calorie in a food journal, cut out sugar and carbohydrates, and committed to daily exercise. Taylor's support helped him stay focused. She prepared healthy meals, joined him on the diet, and kept him accountable every step of the way. The results spoke for themselves. In just 2 months, Brandon lost an astonishing 141 pounds, dropping from 718 to 577. His dedication impressed Dr. Now so much that he approved him for weight loss surgery. However, the doctor warned him not to get complacent, reminding him that progress could stall quickly if he slipped back into old habits. With surgery scheduled for 2 months later, Brandon and Taylor began preparing for a major move to Houston, where they would live for a year during his recovery. The move, however, tested their relationship. Taylor felt overwhelmed by the thought of leaving her home, her job, and her support system behind. Tension grew as she expressed feelings of being trapped, and for the first time, Brandon worried that she might walk away. Eventually, they reached a compromise by delaying the surgery for 1 month, giving them time to secure housing and for Taylor to search for work in Houston. It was a moment that demonstrated the strength of their relationship and their shared commitment to the future. When the day of the surgery finally arrived, disaster struck. Brandon's weight had continued to drop, with another 68 pounds gone, bringing him to 509. Yet doctors discovered a severe infection in his legs. The cellulitis posed a life-threatening risk if it entered his bloodstream, forcing them to postpone the procedure. Brandon was devastated. After months of effort, the finish line suddenly seemed distant once again. He was placed on a powerful course of antibiotics and told the infection needed to clear before surgery could continue. The setback took its toll. Frustration crept in, and Brandon admitted to straying from his diet at times. Even so, his progress remained impressive. He lost an additional 21 pounds, and Dr. Now was satisfied enough to move forward once the infection was under control. Despite every obstacle, from crippling fears to emotional stress, from life-threatening complications to crushing disappointment, Brandon's determination never wavered. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save his life had turned into something deeper, a journey built on love, perseverance, and second chances. He was no longer just fighting to shed weight. He was fighting to reclaim a future with Taylor, a future where his body was no longer a prison, but a vessel for a life he was finally ready to live. And after everything he had endured, Brandon was closer than ever to getting that chance. Yet reaching that chance meant confronting the pain he avoided, facing the past to heal the future. Brandon's long-awaited surgery finally took place, and while he was under anesthesia, doctors discovered a major complication, a large cluster of gallstones. To prevent future problems, they removed his gallbladder during the same operation. It was an unexpected development, but recovery went smoothly, and Brandon continued to make progress once he returned home. Within weeks, he shed another 42 pounds, proving that his determination to move forward had not faded. Still, Dr. Now knew that lasting change required more than physical effort. To truly overcome his food addiction, Brandon needed to confront the emotional wounds that had fueled it for decades. He began therapy with psychologist Lola Clay, who guided him into the deeper roots of his struggles. She encouraged him to face the unresolved pain surrounding his father, the betrayal, the abandonment, and the bitterness that still lingered. Lola reminded him that the end of his parents' marriage did not erase the good memories he once shared with his dad, nor did it mean his father's love had ever been false. Accepting those words was far from easy. The hurt ran deep, and the idea of separating his father's mistakes from their bond felt almost impossible. Lola then suggested a powerful exercise, writing a letter to his father expressing everything he had never said. The task affected Brandon far more than he expected. Digging up those buried emotions left him raw and unsettled, and it began to interfere with his progress. Cravings returned, discipline slipped, and in 1 month, he lost only 8 pounds. The setback revealed how deeply his addiction was tied to unresolved trauma. Food had never been just a source of comfort. It had always been a shield against feelings he had never truly faced. Despite this emotional setback, Brandon was now more than 300 pounds lighter, an extraordinary milestone. Yet he still had over 200 pounds left to lose before completing the program, and Dr. Now worried that his emotional struggles might halt his progress. Lola gently encouraged him to take the next step, reaching out to his father directly. When Brandon found his father's number online, though, the weight of the task overwhelmed him. The thought of making that call felt unbearable. He wanted to confront the past, but the fear of reopening old wounds stopped him in his tracks. Anyone who has been estranged from a loved one could understand his pain. Cutting ties does not erase love, and the ache of unfinished conversations can last for years. Brandon's hesitation showed just how much this unresolved relationship still controlled him. Instead of allowing those emotions to push him back toward food, he tried something different. He channeled them into music. A talented musician, Brandon began writing a song about his father, pouring years of hurt and confusion into lyrics and melody. The act of songwriting might not have solved everything, but it marked a turning point. For the first time, he was confronting his pain instead of burying it under food. This emotional reckoning became as vital to his transformation as any diet or exercise plan. Brandon was learning that true recovery was not just about losing weight. It was about healing the wounds that had driven him to seek comfort in the first place. And as he strummed his guitar and sang through the pain, he took another step toward the life he had been fighting so hard to build. Brandon's journey shows that transformation is about far more than numbers on a scale. It's about healing pain, rebuilding relationships, and choosing hope even when the odds seem impossible. His story has inspired countless viewers to believe change is possible, no matter how heavy the past feels. What part of his journey moved you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.